Straight ahead on Face the State, both Republicans and Democrats are now agreeing marijuana will be legalized in Connecticut. But what will a pot-smoking Connecticut look like? We'll discuss with marijuana advocate and attorney Aaron Romano. Plus, how will and how should Governor Malloy be remembered? We will talk about his legacy with one of his closest advisors, Andrew Doba. Big news this week, Lieutenant Governor Nancy Wyman takes over as chairman of the Democratic Party. Also a new business in Connecticut with a positive message. Co-founders Aaron and Jocelyn Amar are here. Plus our flashback, when Monday Night Football's Joe Tessitore was one of us, and the Hartford Whalers were Connecticut's team. All straight ahead this Sunday, December 16th, 2018.
From Eyewitness News, Connecticut's most watched local political program, this is Face the State.
Good morning, everyone. It is 8:30. Welcome to Face the State. I'm Dennis House. Marijuana will be legalized in Connecticut. That's what both Republicans and Democrats are saying these days, saying it will happen next year. Now, we've discussed the pros and the cons of whether it should be legalized in the program this past year. So today we're going to talk about potential details. And with us is an attorney with Connecticut NORML, which is an advocacy group for the legalization of marijuana, Aaron Romano. Mr. Romano, thanks for being on here.
Good morning, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here.
So NORML stands for what again?
The National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws.
And one of the big things you're saying is that under the new laws, you'd like to see it called something else than marijuana.
That's right. We're trying to move away from calling it marijuana. Marijuana was the term that was coined by Harry Anslinger when he was making cannabis illegal. And what we're trying to do is move back to what it's originally called, which is cannabis. That's its scientific name, and it actually has biblical origins. And it stems from the Hebrew word cannabisum, which is in the Bible, and it refers to this plant.
Our next governor, Ned Lamont, says he is in favor of legalizing marijuana in our state. Democrats now have the numbers to make it happen in the legislature, so it's a foregone conclusion that in some form, marijuana will be legalized in Connecticut next year. Which kind of legalization would you like to see?
So there are several things that really need to be addressed. The first is the medical program in Connecticut. Connecticut has the only medical program in the Northeast where patients are unable to grow their own medicine. Now, this makes it very difficult for some of these patients who have extreme illnesses where they cannot work and they can't afford their medicine. So like other states that have medical programs, we're pushing so that patients in Connecticut can grow their own medicine. That's number one. Number two is a criminal justice reform. There are hundreds of thousands of people out there with cannabis convictions. And so the legislature should address this. They did address this when there was decriminalization in 2014. My firm, unfortunately, had to take a case all the way up to the Connecticut Supreme Court to ensure that people could erase their convictions from minor offenses. But if something is going to be legal at that point, the legislature should act and erase all the convictions for people who have been convicted of cannabis offenses.
Would that also mean releasing people in prison who are in there for the same offenses?
Of course. So if we're erasing their convictions, then people who are currently in jail, their sentences should be commuted, and people who are in on bail that they can't afford, they should obviously be released from prison for that.
How would Connecticut look with recreational marijuana being legalized? Would it be sold in, do you go to the CVS and pick it up with your mouthwash, or what do you do?
Well, it really depends on how Connecticut wants to grow its program. And I say that with no pun intended, but there are different models that could be implemented. If Connecticut intends on building an economy around cannabis, it has to do so to involve small businesses. Right now, with the medical program, we've seen that Connecticut has been very restrictive with their awards of licenses. There are only 4 medical producers in the state. What that means is the jobs are not being created for numerous people who want to get into the industry. I get calls from people all the time who own small businesses, restaurants, tanning salons, nail salons, who have money to reinvest in the community and create jobs. But unfortunately, the state has created a model where those people, because they don't have enough money, can't get into the business.
So would you want to have them sold at like package stores or separate stores, something like that?
We already have a working model. If we take a look at the way liquor and wine and beer is sold, we have a working model for a controlled substance, if you will. That could be an intoxicant. So we just have to implement the same model for cannabis. So for instance, zoning laws regulate where liquor stores can be. And so that's the way, similarly, cannabis stores should also follow those zoning rules as well.
What about smoking publicly? Would you be able to go through a park and smoke it outside a restaurant in a smoking area?
Well, again, we have a model that's already working for liquor. So one is not allowed to imbibe in liquor outside on a public thoroughfare or public street. But many states that have legalized cannabis have done so with private clubs. That would be the equivalent of a bar where people go and they drink alcohol in a setting that's where it's permitted. Minors, of course, are not permitted there, and so the same model could be a working model for cannabis.
Some of those who have been opposed to the legalization of marijuana have a serious concern about people driving while impaired, that there's no real way to tell if a person is stoned and they're in a crash. What do you think about that, and what should be done?
Well, law enforcement is already addressing this issue nationwide, and the fact that something will become legal isn't going to change the way law enforcement acts. If someone is suspected of being under the influence, there are certain tests that can be performed to determine whether or not a person is under the influence of over-the-counter cough medicine. The fact is, you're not allowed to drive while intoxicated, even in states where cannabis is legal. And police officers have the ability to determine whether or not someone's intoxicated. And they should be penalized for that if they're breaking the law.
It's a visual thing, though, in terms of telling whether a person is impaired by marijuana. There's no way to test it like there is liquor, correct?
Right. So there's no level that you can test in the blood to say that this person is intoxicated by cannabis to a certain degree where they cannot drive. It's something that would have to be observational by the officer. So if the person is clearly swerving across the road, left and right, and unable to keep their balance, that would be an indicator that they're under the influence.
I know there are a lot of different thoughts on this, but what is your take on how much money the state could make off legalizing recreational marijuana?
Again, it depends on how the state implements the program. If they implement it in the restrictive manner in which they've done the medical program, and Connecticut's medical program has been one of the most restrictive in the country. If they do it that way, only the very few who are awarded those licenses will make any money. I think the way Connecticut should do it is they should do it to enable farmers to be involved. They should enable small businesses to be involved and let the zoning regs and the zoning rules of the municipalities determine where those shops should be. It's very important for the farmers. I want to make this point clear. California was the only state that classified cannabis as an agricultural crop. Connecticut's Farm Bureau supports legalization. I'm on the board of directors for the Harford County Farm Bureau, and we've been pushing for legalization at the state capitol so that farmers can be involved. Right now, the way cannabis is grown is indoors. There's no true way to grow organically indoors. We have farmers who are engaged in non-GMO, organic farming who can provide safe access to clean cannabis for the community.
It's going to be an interesting topic to cover next year. Aaron Romano, we thank you so much for being on the program.
Pleasure to be here, Dennis.
When we come back, how should Governor Malloy be remembered? We'll talk about his legacy, and later, a company that will make you smile. And we invite you to watch past interviews of Face the State on our YouTube channel or on the WFSB app. We'll be right back.